Eka, one. Patrika, note. Likhiya, writing. Prataparudra Maharaj. Pasha, addressed to him. Dilapathaya, sent. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When Kamalakanta Vishwasha was in Jagannath Puri, he sent a note through someone to Maharaj Prataparudra. So, I'll just bring everyone up to speed and then we'll talk on the upcoming verses. So, actually, please repeat after me also this little translation. When Kamalakanta Vishwasha was in Jagannath Puri, he sent a note through someone to Maharaj Prataparudra. Okay, so this Kamalakanta Vishwasha, in the preceding verses, he has been told to us that he was a very confidential and close servant of Lord Chaitanya, and that he was the secretary of Advaita Acharya. So this chapter 12 is all about Advaita Acharya and his expansions. So Kamalakanta Vishwasha, he was also known as Kamalananda, and he was the secretary of Advaita Acharya, engaged in his service in this way. So what he did is he wrote a note. This secretary of Advaita Acharya, he wrote a note, and he sent, the contents of this note will be revealed a little later, which I'll cover today. So he sent this note through someone all the way to King Prataparudra. So King Prataparudra, who was he? He was the king of Orissa at that point in time, the king of Jagannath Puri. And at this point in time, Lord Chaitanya was living at Jagannath Puri. So King Prataparudra, I'll just speak a little bit about him, just so that we have an idea of the historical point in time. So yes, so he was the king and of Orissa, and at this time Lord Chaitanya was living at the Jagannath Puri temple, in Jagannath Puri, sorry. And King Prataparudra, he was obviously very rich, but he was also a very, very good devotee, very sincere devotee. And he is the king who started sweeping in front of Lord Jagannath's cart. So he started this tradition. So when the Rath Yatra is starting, you might have noticed that there is usually a broom in front of the cart, and somebody grabs the broom and starts sweeping in front of the cart to clear the path for Lord Jagannath, Baldev and Subhadra to come. So this tradition was started by King Prataparudra at that time in Jagannath Puri. And he had a very sincere desire to see Lord Chaitanya, but Lord Chaitanya, he said no. And the reason for this is that Lord Chaitanya was being very, very cautious. And the caution is that sages and spiritual masters, they shouldn't associate with rich and worldly people for the fear of contamination. To accept money and to accept grains from worldly people and kings, it's thought to it has a subtle influence, and what it does, it kind of makes one's thoughts jumbled, and then there is less devotion to Krishna, and therefore like the whole following of that particular spiritual master can fall down. So this is why very strictly in those days sages and spiritual masters used to not associate with worldly people. They thought they would actually see worldly people as snakes, as serpents, that these people, that their mentality is like a snake's poison and can infect this mentality. So this kind of is a little bit subtle to understand, but this is why Lord Chaitanya, being very strict, he didn't want to associate, he didn't want to become swayed by any conflicts of interest, basically. So, however, this King Prataparudra's son did come and meet Lord Chaitanya. And so Lord Chaitanya's servants, they are more merciful than Lord Chaitanya, even if that is something I can say. It's like we know that Krishna's servants are more merciful than Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya, however, he is the most merciful incarnation, but we do see his servants, what they were trying to do at this point, like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He was trying to say to Lord Chaitanya, but Lord Chaitanya, he is such a nice devotee and you've already met his son, why don't you please meet him? And Lord Chaitanya said, no, I'll leave Jagannath Puri, but I won't meet the king. So then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, being very merciful, he said to King Prataparudra, well, after the Rath Yatra, when the Rath has come to the Gundicha temple, then Lord Chaitanya, he will go to the garden. He will go to the Gundicha garden, and he is going to be in a very deep mood. He is going to be in this mood of Radharani, feeling separation from Krishna. And at that point in time, dear king, if you go in to the garden, but you should not be dressed in your kingly clothes, you should be dressed in just simple clothes, and you go into the garden and you recite Srimad Bhagavatam and you recite the Gopi Gita. So what's the Gopi Gita? It's this prayers of separation that the gopis were singing when they were feeling separation from Krishna, when Krishna left them during the Rasa dance. So here is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya giving, as a very merciful devotee, giving instructions to the king, that this is how you can get the association and the darshan of Lord Chaitanya. So then this is what the king did, and he was able to meet Lord Chaitanya and get his mercy in this way. But also, even though, like I said, Lord Chaitanya was very strict and he didn't want to meet the king, it's not that he was hard-hearted. Quite the contrary, Lord Chaitanya is very soft-hearted. So he gave the king his mercy even before meeting him in the garden. So how he did this is, when the Rath was going, there's so many things that happened when this Lord Jagannath's Rath was going from the Jagannath Puri temple to the Gundicha temple, so many things happened along that procession. And one of the things that happened is that Lord Chaitanya, he was dancing in front of the cart, but he wasn't dancing just in front of one cart. He was simultaneously dancing in front of all three carts. And in fact, it is described that there were 7 dancing parties, and that Lord Chaitanya was in all of them. But only 3 people could see that Lord Chaitanya was in all of these 7 dancing parties. And one of those 3 people was the king. So these 3 people were Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Mishra, and the King Prataparudra. So he was one of these 3 people who could see Lord Chaitanya simultaneously dancing in all the 7 parties. So in this way, Lord Chaitanya was very merciful. This vision was restricted only to these 3 people. Other people over there couldn't see. They could only see Lord Chaitanya in the one place. So he was very merciful. He did give the king his mercy, and finally the king got his desire and did meet Lord Chaitanya as well. So going back to this verse, what's happening is that Advaita Acharya's secretary has sent a little note through to the king. But before it gets to the king, this is what happened. So this is verse 30. No one knew of that note, but somehow or other it reached the hands of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So before getting to the king, it somehow got to the hands of Lord Chaitanya. And in this note, the contents of this note was that note established Advaita Acharya as an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but it also mentioned that Advaita Acharya had recently incurred a debt of about 300 rupees that Kamalakanta Vishwasha wanted to liquidate. Right, so what happened is this note had two main points in it, and one of the points was, and this is Advaita Acharya's secretary Kamalakanta Vishwasha establishing, he's saying in the note that Advaita Acharya, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is. Then the second point, however, was that recently Advaita Acharya has gotten into debt, and the debt is of 300 rupees. So we know that 300 rupees isn't very much at all at this point in time. It was in those days, but right now it's not very much at all. So as a good secretary, what he was trying to do, he was trying to liquidate this debt, to get out of this debt. So this is why he was writing to the king, to try to get out of this debt. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he became unhappy upon reading the note, although his face still shone as brightly as the moon. Thus smiling, he spoke as follows. So Lord Chaitanya, when he got the note, he got unhappy, but externally he didn't show it. He was still smiling and his face was still shining brightly. And then this is what Lord Chaitanya said. So this is Lord Chaitanya speaking. He has established Advaita Acharya as an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is nothing wrong in this, for he is indeed the Lord himself. So Lord Chaitanya is talking about Kamalakanta Vishwasha having established Advaita Acharya as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is saying, this is good, there is nothing wrong in this. He is indeed the Lord himself. That is, Advaita Acharya is indeed the Supreme Lord himself. Then Lord Chaitanya says, but he has made the incarnation of Godhead a poverty-stricken beggar. Therefore, I shall punish him for his correction. So Lord Chaitanya was unhappy about the second point in that note, which said that Advaita Acharya has got this debt, and because Lord Chaitanya is in this position of authority, he wanted to do the right thing and set an example and correct Kamalakanta Vishwasha. So I will punish him for his correction. So the purport of this verse, I will read now and then we'll talk a little bit about it. To describe a man as an incarnation of God or Narayan and at the same time present him as poverty-stricken is contradictory, and it is the greatest offense. The Mayavadi philosophers engaged in the missionary work of spoiling the Vedic culture by preaching that everyone is God describe a poverty-stricken man as Daridra Narayan or Poor Narayan. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never accepted such foolish and unauthorized ideas. He strictly warned, Mayavadi bhashya sunile haya sarvanasha. Anyone who follows the principles of Mayavad philosophy is certainly doomed. Such a fool needs to be reformed by punishment. So I'll just say something here before I move on with the purport, and that is that there's some points mentioned here which I will come and talk about in more detail, but these points are that first of all he is saying that he is the Lord, but then he's kind of saying he's got a debt, so that Lord Narayan can never be poor. And then the Mayavadi point is raised, and the Mayavadi point I will discuss also later. And that this is why Lord Chaitanya wanted to punish Kamalakanta Vishwasha, that this is actually Mayavadi philosophy that he is saying. So that's why I need to punish him. So moving on with the purport. Although it is contradictory to say that the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his incarnation is poverty-stricken, we find in the revealed scriptures that when the Lord incarnated as Vamana, he begged some land from Maharaj Bali. Everyone knows, however, that Vamana was not at all poverty-stricken. His begging from Maharaj Bali was a device to favor him. When Maharaj Bali actually gave the land, Vamana Dev exhibited his all-powerful position by covering the three worlds with 3 steps. One should not accept the so-called Daridra Narayans as incarnations because they are completely unable to show the opulence of the genuine incarnations of God. Okay, so the few things we'll talk about which has come up in this purport. So the first thing is that there is the definition of God. Right? Does anyone know this definition of God? This definition is given by Parasar Muni. Parasar Muni, he is the father of Srila Vyasadeva, who wrote all the Vedic scriptures. So Parasar Muni has said this famous verse. And it's really worthwhile getting to know this verse because it comes up over and over, and it is the definition of God. So if somebody says, I am God, you can say, da 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 da, do you fit this criteria? So this is the verse. Aishvarasya samagrasya veera yasya yasa shahashriya jnana vairagyayas sanam bhagam itinkana. So this verse is basically Bhagavan. Who is Bhagavan? There are six things that makes one Bhagavan. And this is, Bhagavan has full strength, 100% strength. Bhagavan has full fame. He is the most famous. He has full wealth. He is the most wealthy. He has full knowledge, the most knowledgeable. He is the most beautiful. And he is the most renounced. So these are the 6 things that if someone has in full, if someone has each of these 6 things 100%, that is who we call Bhagavan. So I'll give you an example, like you have Dwayne Johnson. He's known as The Rock, if anybody didn't know that. So he's very strong. Like he's got big muscles, he's really powerful. One time his front gate, his electronic gate got locked, and instead of doing anything else, he actually broke that gate with his bare hands. So he's so strong. However, he is not 100% strong. So people are attracted to him. You can see in this world, people are attracted to other personalities who are very rich, or who are very strong, or who are very beautiful. They just automatically get a following, right? However, if someone has, so you can imagine, if someone is very, very strong, very, very rich, very, very beautiful, full of knowledge, and full of renunciation, all of that at the same time, you can imagine how attractive that person is. And we don't have to imagine. We have that person. There he is, right there, Krishna. So that is Bhagavan. And his description is given like this. So that's why Lord Chaitanya is saying over here that it is contradictory. You are saying he is Bhagavan, Advaita Acharya is Bhagavan, but then how are you saying that he is poverty-stricken? How are you saying that he's got this debt? This is an offense. And this is a bit of this impersonal Mayavadi philosophy creeping in you, Kamalakanta Vishwasha. So let me correct you so that it's an example to everyone. So then let's talk about this Mayavadi philosophy a little bit. It's a bit dangerous to talk about it because Lord Chaitanya said here, he warned strictly that anybody who hears and accepts Mayavadi philosophy, who follows these principles, he is certainly doomed. So when we hear it with the mood that I need to be careful. This is not the mentality I want. This is what Lord Chaitanya said I should stay away from. So some of the Mayavadi concepts are, and the one that is being referred to here in particular is this concept of Narayanosmi or Daridra Narayan. So the Mayavadis, they have several misconceptions. One of their misconceptions is that when the body finishes, everything is finished, that the soul also finishes. So that's monism. They think that there is no dualism, that the soul and the body are not different. So that's one misconception they have. Whereas we know that the body and the soul are different, that I am not the body. And the other misconception that they have is they believe that everyone is Narayan. That you are Narayan, I am Narayan, everyone's Narayan. So, Narayanosmi, that's what they think. We know that this is not true. We know that in our hearts we have Narayan over there, the super soul, the Paramatma, and we have the soul. So there is both in the heart. But we are not Narayan, we are the soul. Narayan is present in our heart as Paramatma, as the super soul. So then somebody asked them, so if you are all Narayan, if you accept that we are all Narayan, dear Mayavadi philosopher, how come some of you are poor? Because Narayan is never poor. Then they say, oh, that person is Daridra Narayan, that person is a poor Narayan, which is, Daridra just means poor. So it's a totally false misconception. It's basically a misconception. So Narayan can never be poor, and this is very strongly stated by Lord Chaitanya, that Narayan can never be poor, and that is going back, and this is why he can never be poor, because he is Bhagavan, and Bhagavan is full of those 6 opulences, 100%. So such a fool needs to be reformed. Lord Chaitanya was there to very strongly preach against Mayavadi philosophy. So at that point in time, there were various schools of thoughts. And it was actually a little bit easy to distinguish, because these groups of people hung out together. Whereas nowadays, all these misconceptions are in the one body, in us, or in the one person. So it's like, there's not a group, oh, I'm the Mayavadis, let's go hang out with the Mayavadis, oh, I'm this group, let's go hang out here. It's like we have all these misconceptions. So this is why the scriptures are strongly speaking out to remove any of these misconceptions if we might have them. So at one time, we all know the story of Lord Vamanadev, right? Lord Vamanadev, he is the dwarf incarnation of Krishna. Very, very cute. Like little boy, chubby little dwarf boy, with blonde hair tied up in a top knot, holding a white umbrella. Very cute. So actually when the people in Bali Maharaj's court saw, Bali Maharaj's sister in particular, when she saw Lord Vamanadev come, she fell in love with him maternally. That he is such a cute little boy. She fell in love with him like that. So, but at the same time, she wanted to kill him, because she knew that this boy had come to take King Bali's, her brother's kingdom away. So that's why she became Putna. In Krishna's pastime, she was actually Putna. So she had that maternal affection of wanting to nourish this boy. So she was able to feed him as Putana, but she also wanted to kill him. So she managed to do both of this, trying to do both of this as Putana. So anyway, when Lord Vamanadev, looking very cute, came into Bali Maharaj's court, then Bali Maharaj, then he basically, being a good devotee, he offered Lord Vamanadev those 3 steps of land that Lord Vamanadev wanted. He thought, oh, this is a little dwarf, he's only got little footsteps, his little paces are only going to take a few little things, although he was warned against this, but he actually did go ahead and give him the 3 paces of land, which ended up being the entire creation. And at this point in time, the point that is being mentioned here is, so if somebody wants to, so this is Prabhupada bringing up arguments that might come, bringing up doubts that might arise in one's mind, and then clearing those doubts. So if one says that, how come then, if Narayan is never poor, how come Lord Vamanadev came and begged for land? That's in that way he's acting as being poor. But then Prabhupada clears that misconception up and says that everybody knew that Vamanadev was not at all poor, and that his begging of land was actually just a ruse. It was just a device, it was just a ploy to actually favor Bali Maharaj, to give Bali Maharaj mercy. And that Bali Maharaj, by doing this, he became a Mahajan, Mahajan meaning one of the 12 Mahajans, one in whose footsteps we as devotees should be following, and also that it was not that Lord Vamanadev was poor. It was mainly to favor Bali Maharaj and to reveal the glories of his devotee Bali Maharaj that Lord Vamanadev did this. So one should never accept these theories that I am Narayan, you are Narayan. One should never accept the theories that Narayan is poor. All these Mayavadi things should never be accepted. This is why Lord Chaitanya then in the next verse 36 and 37 onwards, he is going to give a punishment to Kamalakanta Vishwasha. I won't spoil the story by saying that now. So so he gives a punishment, and how all of that works out will be explained later. But this is why, like, we might think that Advaita Acharya's secretary Kamalakanta Vishwasha was acting in Advaita Acharya's best interest by trying to get rid of debt, and he was acting in his best interest. However, Lord Chaitanya was trying to set very clearly this example that there should not be any misconception that Narayan is poor. Okay, I'm going to say a little story which is something that one will encounter if you ever go to South India. So if one ever travels to South India, and it's bona fide to travel to South India for pilgrimage, because Lord Chaitanya did that. Lord Chaitanya visited all the temples in South India, well, most of them. And if one happens to go to South India, you will see a deity over there who is standing with two female personalities on each side. And there's a story. There's actually a big story, and there's a big story behind this. And it's actually it's funny. It's a funny story, but it's also just a pastime. It's a pastime in that it was something that happened when the Lord came to earth, and that's why he's got two wives. That he's married to two wives at that point in time. I'm bringing that story up now because it's actually a pastime, but it's contradictory to what's being said, that Narayan is never poor. And it is very true, and I've established why Narayan is never poor, because he's Bhagavan. But in this story, which we need to very clearly understand is just a pastime of the Lord, it's not negating him as Bhagavan in any way. And I'm telling this story so that one doesn't get confused if one ever visits South India and sees these deities. So basically what happened is that it's quite complex, but basically what happened is one time Lakshmi Devi and Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, they had a disagreement, and Lord Vishnu came to earth. And when he came to earth, he was apparently very poor. And he wanted to, and then somebody wanted to get married to him. And who this somebody was? She was the personality who had been kidnapped by Ravana. So who was Sita, but not who was the spirit soul who had been acting Sita's part? Because we know that it wasn't actual; it was Maya Sita who got kidnapped by Ravana. So this personality, this spirit soul who was Maya Sita, had actually fallen in love with Lord Ram and wanted to marry Lord Ram. But we know that Lord Ram he had a vow, Eka Patni Vrata, only one wife. So this personality couldn't marry Lord Ram in that incarnation. So she was in love with Lord Ram though. So when Lord Vishnu came to earth, she wanted to get married to him, and so did Lord Vishnu. However, at this point in time, Lord Vishnu was poor because he came to earth and he was in this pastime. So then Lord Vishnu asked a loan, and he asked a loan from somebody. And if you again visit some temples, in one of the temples, it's actually written in like a gold sheeting, and it's actually written that these are the conditions of this loan being given to Lord Vishnu, and it's displayed there in the temple. So, and apparently it's written by one of the spiritual personalities, but not by Lord Vishnu. It's written by Lord Brahma, apparently. I've got that picture saved. So anyway, what happened then is, so this lady who had been Maya Sita wanted to get married to Lord Vishnu. And when Lakshmi Devi, she simultaneously arrived at that point in time, and she saw that, oh, Lord Vishnu is about to get married to Maya Sita, and he's gotten a loan to do that. How can this happen? And Lord Vishnu knew he was in trouble, because he's got Maya Sita over here, and then his real wife Lakshmi Devi's arrived as well. So he turned himself into a deity to get out of trouble. And then the two ladies on either side of him also turned into deities. So this is why, if you go to this temple in South India, you will see that this is Lord Vishnu, and there is Bhu Devi, and there is Lakshmi Devi on each side of him, and that he was getting a loan. So somebody might bring this up as well and say, so how come Lord Vishnu came and he was asking for a loan? Doesn't that mean he was poor? No, because that was just a pastime done on earth. And so Bhagavan, the definition of Bhagavan stands intact. The other thing that Prabhupada says is that people are poor, and people don't realize this. Prabhupada says this, that people don't realize this, that in their hearts there is not just Narayan, there is also Lakshmi. That Lord Narayan and Lord Lakshmi are in everyone's heart, because that's Lord Vishnu stays with Lord Lakshmi most of the time. Goddess Lakshmi does leave Lord Vishnu sometimes, but Prabhupada is saying this in one of his purports, that in everyone's heart there is Lord Vishnu as well as Goddess Lakshmi, but people are poor because they don't actually realize this, and people call each other Daridra Narayan because they don't realize that Lakshmi is also there with Vishnu. So if we had any of these misconceptions, they are hopefully now clear. And the last sentence in this purport is, one should not accept the so-called Daridra Narayans as incarnations, because they are completely unable to show the opulence of the genuine incarnation of God. So there was a lot of confusion back in Lord Chaitanya's time, and people were all sort of saying, I am God, but clearly through the eyes of scripture we can see who is God. Okay, so I'll stop. But maybe I'll just say something else, because so like I was saying, the definition of God, the six things are that full of these six opulences, full of strength, full of fame, full of wealth, full of knowledge, beauty and renunciation. So like I was saying, if one has, and in this material world, like I gave that example of the rock, like if one person has even one of those things, like very strong or very beautiful, then there's a lot of attraction towards that person. We can see, they automatically get a following, like I was saying. So how come when Krishna is full of these six opulences, he's full of these opulences, how come we can't actually feel that attraction to Krishna? Why not? Would anybody like to say?
One reason could be that we are bedazzled by one of his other energies.
That's
asking who is the energetic. I'm completely. He's not saying the dazzling deadly liquid toy for early hearts employed. Mm-hmm. No. Mm. So I'm totally enamored of the material energy.
Yeah, that's one of the big reasons. One of the big reasons that Prabhu has said is that we are bedazzled by Krishna's other energy. And this other energy is material energy. So because we are so bedazzled by this material energy, we are like kids in a chocolate shop. Like just let loose. Yes?
Another reason could be that like he came down here because we were jealous of him, so like envying him.
Yes, that's true also.
We were like attracted to him.
That's very true, actually, yes, and I'll touch on that point a bit later. So, the first point is that we are bedazzled by material energy, and we are therefore like too busy. Too busy. Bedazzled means like you've got stars in your eyes, you're just like, wow, that's bedazzled. And so we are not, and that's then what you said, Nimai, is that then because of that we are not so attracted to Krishna. So how do we build that attraction to Krishna? So there's also an example, like there was this personality, I forget his name, but he was very much in love with his girlfriend. Very, very much in love with his girlfriend. And when he was asked, why are you in love, so much in love with her? He said, she's got the most beautiful eyes. So I'm really in love with her. And then this person said, what if I showed you somebody who had even more beautiful eyes? And he said, okay, show me this person. So then this person took this person to the deity of the Lord and said, here's Krishna, and he's got the most beautiful eyes. And when he saw the deity, he fell in love with Krishna. That story has a good ending, actually. He did still get married to his girlfriend, and they both became very wonderful devotees of the Lord. This story is from Ramanuja Acharya's time, this story. So because we are, like Nimai said, when we've come to this earth planet, we originally came because we wanted to have our own enjoyment. We were a little bit envious of the Lord. We wanted to enjoy ourselves separately. So when we've come here, we've become bedazzled. Like I like to think of it as kids in a chocolate shop, in a lolly shop, just running amok and, trying out everything and just being really attracted and caught up in Maya. And just self-enjoyment, sense gratification. So because we are so busy doing that, we then fail to look at the Lord. And this attraction towards the Lord, if we know the Lord is full of these opulences. Now, one of the other reasons is that it is actually Maya Devi covering us and preventing us from seeing the Lord fully like that. Why so? Why is she stopping us from seeing the Lord like that? The answer is that she is very protective of her brother. She's very protective of her younger brother Krishna. She doesn't want anybody who is not completely sincere to get close to Krishna. Because if somebody gets close to Krishna, then Krishna gives them everything. He really gives unreservedly. And so Maya Devi is very protective. She will test us until she is sure we are solidly sincere before she lifts that curtain and allows us to see Krishna fully. So we need to therefore make ourselves sincere. How we make ourselves sincere is by chanting very sincere rounds. And by really, when we do something, not just doing it, but actually putting a meaning behind it, understanding why we are doing it. Sincerity needs to be there. Chanting our rounds sincerely and by following the regulative principles so that we don't get into sinning again. So this is what's going to eventually, hopefully, reveal the Lord in His full 6 opulences to us and make us all attracted to Him. Because the word Krishna means all attractive. So it's just, if we can't see that, there's something wrong with us, not something wrong with Him. So we need to try to make ourselves qualified so that we can actually see Him as all attractive. Okay? Does anyone have anything to say? Are there any questions or comments or anything like that? If not, I've got something else funny to say, which is, so I asked Nimai to sing the bhajan this morning before class. So when we were coming in the car, I asked him, read the translation of it, so that when you are singing, you sing with meaning and you ask for mercy from Gauranitai. And then what I was thinking at that time was, when Prabhupada went to meet his wife for the first time, before they got married, when Prabhupada went to meet his wife, she sang something very nicely. she played an instrument and she sang something very, very nicely with great sort of, emotion like that. And then when Prabhupada asked her, so do you know what you were singing? And she said, no. I just learned it from my music teacher and, just singing it. So Prabhupada laughed like that. He was like, oh, okay, so you're just singing it like a parrot? He actually says this, if you read the history. So you just sing it like a parrot. And she became very embarrassed and she started crying. So, what I was trying to, so anyway, that thought came to mind this morning, that when we do something, we need to do it with meaning, with sincerity, and that's the genuineness that Krishna is looking for. So we need to all cultivate this mood and not do it for show bottle purposes, but to actually try to go back to Godhead. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Shri Advaita Acharya ki jai, Shri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi.